Uncle An, what's going on? What are you doing?
Lin Yi's voice wavered as he called out, but Chengdao didn't even flinch. The older man walked with a heavy, purposeful stride toward the unconscious stranger, ignoring his companions entirely.
Uncle An.
Lin Yi stepped closer to Flower, his hands waving dismissively as he tried to rationalize the situation.
Don't get the wrong idea, Flower. Uncle An is just being thorough. He's probably trying to strip that guy's gear before he wakes up. Look at those gauntlets. They're clearly dangerous tech. Wrapping him in silk might not be enough if he decides to resist. Uncle N knows what he's doing. Standard procedure, secure the prisoner and disarm them immediately. It's just common sense.
But Lin Yi's logic felt hollow. The thick, sweet fragrance from Flower's skin was strong enough to keep a monster sedated for hours. There was no practical reason for Uncle An to be in such a desperate hurry.
Weapons.
Zhang Cheng's eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed on the man's rigid back. A cold shiver crawled up his spine. Something about the butcher's movements felt fundamentally wrong. And Chengdao knelt beside the stranger, but he didn't reach for the massive gauntlets. Instead, his fingers slipped inside the man's jacket with an uncanny familiarity. He pulled out a small metal cube, no larger than half a palm. A tiny, multifaceted crystal was embedded in its surface, glinting like a cold, artificial eye.
Wait, Uncle An, what is that thing?
Lin Yi leaned forward, drawn in by the strange object, but a hand suddenly clamped onto his shoulder.
Get back now.
Zhang Cheng yanked Lin Yi away, his focus never wavering from the man on the ground. A single, terrifying question hammered in his mind. How did Uncle An know exactly where that cube was hidden? Zhang Cheng leaned closer to Lin Yi, his voice barely a breath against the younger boy's ear, his eyes locked on the kneeling butcher.
Lin Yi, something is seriously wrong with Uncle An. Uncle An?
Lin Yi's call was met with a chilling response. A slow, predatory smile pulled at the corners of Chengdao's mouth, an expression Lin Yi had never seen on the man's normally stoic face. Since they had met, Uncle An had been a pillar of grim, silent strength. He was the one who risked everything to protect them, who guided them through the nightmare of the hair-snail parasites. But that smile, it was cold, calculating. It felt like a mask slipping, revealing a stranger beneath the skin. A cascade of doubts suddenly flooded Lin Yi's mind. Why had Chengdao stayed in the city for so long after finding the key? Why did he wait until he met Lin Yi to finally try and escape? He had been wounded, hunted by the police, and yet he lingered in the shadows of Xifang Mountain. What was he waiting for all that time? Lin Yi didn't want to doubt him. They wouldn't have survived this far without the man's help. But as he watched Chengdao's next movement, a cold, paralyzing dread began to swallow him whole.
Uncle An, talk to us. Why aren't you answering?
The butcher remained a statue, his focus entirely on the metal cube. With a slow, deliberate motion, he raised the device toward his face. In a blur of shifting metal, the cube reconfigured itself around his jawline, forming a sleek, industrial respirator. The tiny crystal pulsed with a cold light directly over his mouth.
Wait, that thing just changed shape. It's like living metal.
Is that a respirator? He's shielding himself from the fragrance.
Lin Yi didn't hesitate. The heavy barrel of his shotgun snapped up, leveling directly at Chengdao's chest with a lethal finality.
Don't move, not one more muscle.
Lin Yi, what are you doing? That's Uncle An. Put the gun down.
Uncle An, I need an answer right now. Why are you using that murderer's equipment? What's going on?
The man finally looked up, his gaze sweeping over them with a cold, detached amusement. When he spoke, the voice was Uncle An's, but the tone was chillingly alien.
What a fascinating and messy little combination you've put together here. When I saw you carrying that quail hunter's shotgun, I assumed you were one of the creator's hounds, a loyal servant sent to clean up the trash. And yet, here you are, rubbing shoulders with these filthy freaks as if they were your kin. It's almost disappointing. So tell me, who are you people, exactly?
And Chengdao's eyes met Lin Yi's. In that moment, the boy saw a soul that didn't belong to the butcher. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow.
You're not Uncle Ann. You're the bastard from the ground.
The moment the accusation left Lin Yi's lips, the freak lunged forward, its mouth unhinged, spitting a massive, sticky glob of silk with the force of a projectile. Simultaneously, and Chengdao's hands slammed onto the stranger's gauntlets. The metal shrieked with high-tech life, disassembling into a swarm of segments that crawled up his arms like a parasitic armor. The backs of the newly formed gloves pulsed with a cold cyan light. A shimmering wall of invisible force erupted around the butcher, the freak's silk splashing harmlessly against it. And Chengdao raised his hand, his fingers mimicking the shape of a gun. His aim was cold, precise, and utterly devoid of human hesitation. Flower's instincts flared. A thick, thorny vine erupted from beneath her skin, coiling around the freak and jerking it out of the line of fire just as the air began to vibrate with lethal energy.
Bang!
Lu Linhai's face was a mask of pure horror. He stumbled back, his world collapsing as he watched his mentor wield the stranger's nightmare tech.
What the hell is happening? If he's not Uncle Ann, then who is he? Why is he doing this?
He's not Uncle Ann, that bastard on the ground. He didn't just steal the tech, he stole Uncle Ann's entire body.
He's a god chosen. This is a high-tier possession ability. He's operating from within the butcher's mind.
Zhang Cheng backed away, his movements tactical and precise. He leaned into Lin Yi's ear, whispering a few desperate words before moving out of the line of fire.
Oh, look what I've found.
And Chengdao's body began to sway rhythmically, a haunting puppet-like dance that felt utterly alien. He turned his gaze toward Lin Yi, his eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger.
Another god chosen. Right here in the muck. I really did hit the jackpot today.
One by one, the heavy butcher knives flew out of his backpack. They didn't fall, they hovered in the air, orbiting him like a school of razor-sharp fish.
Bringing a specimen like you back to the city. The achievement will be legendary. You're a prize I can't afford to lose. It's just a pity. You're clearly high-quality stock, yet you choose to mix with these filthy freaks. Unforgivable.
Cold, murderous intent flared in his borrowed eyes. The hovering blades began to spin, their edges humming with the promise of a slaughter.
You lot, you're an absolute blight on the human race.
And Chengdao's contempt for Lin Yi and the others burned even hotter than his hatred for the monsters surrounding them. His eyes flared with a murderous hunger, his entire posture screaming that he was ready to pounce and shred them where they stood.
Everyone, get back, now.
With an eerie composure, Flower glided forward, positioning herself like a shield between Lin Yi and the looming threat.
In your current state, you wouldn't last a second against him.
Thick, pulsing vines erupted from her form, lashing through the air with such velocity that they shattered the silence like whip cracks. Without shifting her gaze from the distant adversary, Flower addressed Lin Yi in a level voice.
Don't get the wrong idea. This isn't for your benefit. You're simply obstructing my path. Move, unless you're eager to be caught in the crossfire.
Despite her icy delivery, Lin Yi was struck by a strange realization. She seemed more human in this moment than the creature wearing in Chengdao's face. He didn't argue. It wasn't cowardice that held his hand, but the crushing weight of the weapon in his grip. He knew the consciousness inside wasn't his friend, yet the body was still the one he respected. One shot would end the monster, but it would also end Uncle Anna forever! To make matters worse, Chu Kai was nowhere to be seen, and Lin Yi's mystical threads required a clear line of sight. Without proper training, he couldn't guarantee a hit from this range, and closing the gap meant risking his own life in the inevitable blast. As if reading the turmoil etched on his face, Flower spoke softly, her voice barely a whisper.
Relax. I have no intention of causing him permanent harm. I gave my word to someone important. I won't spill human blood.
The mention of a promise sent Lin Yi's mind racing. Who could have earned such a vow from a creature like her?
I'll figure out how to bring him back. Just hold him off.
He scrambled backward, finding a momentary refuge beside Zhang Cheng. Lu Linhai tightened his grip on his iron pipe, his instinct to help warring with the sheer terror radiating from the scene. Seeing the other monsters retreating into the shadows, he finally relented and fell back to join the others.
Can that girl really take him? She looks like she's made of weeds.
Lin Yi watched the terrifying display of vines and gave a slow, somber nod.
You think a few overgrown roots are enough to stop me?
A mocking grin split on Cheng Dao's face. In an instant, his form became a hazy streak of motion. He kicked off the cracked earth with bone-shattering power, hurtling toward Flower like a guided missile. Flower moved with a speed that defied biological limits, her vines lashing out to intercept the attacker. But Cheng Dao was no clumsy brute. He was a shadow in motion, his body twisting and weaving through the gaps in her defenses. With every step, he narrowed the gap, his eyes locked on her as he danced through the lethal thicket of vines.
That's not how he fights. The Uncle An I know doesn't run from a scrap. If he were himself, he'd be carving those weeds into kindling with his cleaver right now.
He can't touch them. That fluid, it's pure acid. It'll dissolve anything it splashes on.
The intruder within his body seemed keenly aware of the danger, prioritizing evasion over a reckless assault. As the distance vanished, Flower didn't flinch. She stood her ground, waiting for the impact. And Cheng Dao's fists were white-knuckled, the crystalline shards on his gauntlets humming with a rhythmic, ethereal light. Faced with a strike that could shatter concrete, Flower remained a pillar of unsettling stillness. In a blur of redirection, her left hand snared his wrist while her right palm braced against his driving elbow. She didn't fight his momentum. She mastered it, guiding his own weight into a vicious pivot to her rear. Using the torque of his own charge, she drove her shoulder into his sternum with the force of a battering ram.
Is that redirection? She's turning his own strength against him? Since when do monsters study internal martial arts?
Tai Chi? You mean like the old folks in the park? No way!
Her movements were a masterclass in economy and flow, a terrifying fusion of biology and technique that left even the stranger reeling. Lin Yi watched, the memory of her warnings from the previous night finally clicking into place. It wasn't just talk. If she wanted them dead, none of them would have lived to see this morning. Then, with a shift in her posture that promised total devastation, Flower began her counteroffensive. Flower was on him in an eye blink, her left hand snapping up to control his guard. She drove her elbow forward with terrifying momentum, aiming with surgical precision at Cheng Dao's vulnerable throat.
That's an elbow strike to the windpipe. Is she trying to crush his larynx? Wait, that's Krav Maga. I recognize that stance.
Krav? What? Is that another type of tea?
It's a combat system designed for one thing, neutralizing a threat as brutally and efficiently as possible. I tried to study it back when I first suspected my neighbors weren't human, but I've always been more of a bookworm than a brawler. That strike to the throat, it cuts off the oxygen supply and shocks the nervous system. It's meant to end a fight in seconds. She's using her elbow because it's the most devastating natural weapon a human has. It's like being hit by a sledgehammer. Though, whether that human logic holds up against whatever's inside Uncle An is anyone's guess. Look at her, Lin Yi. Are we absolutely sure she's one of them?
Lin Yi stood frozen. the technical brutality of Flower's movements clashing with everything he knew about the monsters. His mind went back to her mention of that person. A mentor? A teacher? Could a human have really taught a monster to fight with such clinical, man-made efficiency? It made no sense. She was a product of the monsters, yet here she was, utilizing the pinnacle of human close-quarters combat. On Chengdao's face was a distorted mask of frustration and pain, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. He'd seen the vines and assumed she was a mid-range specialist. He'd never expected her to be even more lethal up close. Every move she made was a calculated risk he couldn't afford to take. Sensing the shift in the battle, he scrambled backward, desperate to put some distance between them. But the vines were relentless, slithering across the asphalt like hunting serpents, never letting him slip away. And Chengdao raised his hands, the crystals on his metal gauntlets pulsing with a blinding, desperate light. A low hum filled the yard as raw energy began to coalesce around the shards, crackling with unstable power. He was done with fisticuffs. He was preparing to unleash whatever destructive force those gauntlets held. The stranger was resourceful. Even if his host's body couldn't match her speed, his gear, the respirator, the gauntlets gave him an edge.
Lin Yi, wake up! We need to move!
Lin Yi gave a sharp nod, his mind instantly syncing with the unspoken command. He knew exactly what Zhang Cheng was proposing. It was a gamble, but one they had to take. During their brief scramble for safety, Zhang Cheng had whispered a desperate strategy to turn the tide. If this intruder could pilot and Chengdao's body like a puppet, then Lin Yi's threads of fate might allow him to seize the puppet strings from the source. With a surge of focus, glowing filaments of destiny erupted from Lin Yi's chest, shimmering with an ethereal light. The lines lanced out, snaking through the air toward the unconscious man lying on the cold ground. They anchored themselves into the stranger's psyche, establishing a spectral bridge between their minds. But as the connection solidified, Lin Yi felt only a vast, empty silence.
Are you in? Can you feel him?
Lin Yi gave a slow, frustrated shake of his head, his brow furrowed in concentration. Tapping into Chu Kai or Uncle An had been intuitive. Their powers were familiar to him, their spirits open. Even when he'd been clumsy, the essence of their abilities had been there for him to grasp. But this man was a complete enigma. His spirit was a locked vault with no obvious key. Without a frame of reference, the threads of fate were just dead weight.
Wait, I just need to sink deeper. I have to find the spark.
He closed his eyes, shutting out the chaos of the yard to descend into the cold, dark depths of the stranger's consciousness. Borrowing from Uncle An felt like gaining a pair of invisible spectral limbs. Using Chu Kai's senses was like a sharp, electric sting to his perception. So what was the nature of this intruder? What was the shape of his soul? Was it mere possession? Was he a simple puppeteer? No, it felt more parasitic, like a soul slowly consuming the very vessel it inhabited. The moment the realization struck him, a violent, visceral jolt slammed through Lin Yi's entire being. The feeling was utterly alien, a state of being that defied any known vocabulary. Every ounce of mass seemed to evaporate from his frame, leaving him untethered and buoyant. He felt as though a single stray breeze might carry him off into the void. He attempted to find his footing, to exert some control over his limbs, but the solid earth was gone. There was nothing but empty air where the soil should have been. Forcing his eyelids open, he glanced toward the abyss below. The sight that met him chilled whatever remained of his blood. It wasn't a trick of the mind or a lingering dream. Gravity had truly lost its grip on him. Suspended in the atmosphere, his own form looked ghostly and fragile, a shimmering, see-through outline of the person he used to be. From his vantage point, the battlefield below was a chaotic tableau. He watched Flower and the possessed and Chengdao clash with savage grace. Nearby, the mantis wolf shifted restlessly, its inhuman posture radiating a strange, frantic concern. Further down, Zhang Cheng and Lu Linhai huddled together, their expressions masks of sheer terror. And then, there he was, his own physical shell, limp and unmoving on the cold ground. The question echoed through his mind, what had become of him? If that body down there belonged to Lin Yi, then what was this drifting, spectral essence? The realization dawned on him slowly, like a cold wave washing over his consciousness. He finally grasped the mechanic of the stranger's power, the secret of how he had usurped the butcher's flesh. As he drifted back toward the earth, he reached out a translucent hand toward his own face. The moment they touched, a violent, irresistible vacuum seized his spirit. A sickening lurch of vertigo followed. When his vision finally cleared, he found Zhang Cheng and Lu Linhai peering down at him with frantic eyes.
He's coming around! Look! He's actually awake!
Lu Linhai's voice cracked with a mixture of relief and panic.
Lin Yi, you nearly gave me a heart attack. You just collapsed. I honestly thought you'd checked out for good.
Will you shut up with that talk?
Zhang Cheng cut him off with a sharp look of annoyance before focusing his intense gaze back on Lin Yi. A flicker of understanding passed through the strategist's eyes.
Tell me, did you manage to do it?
Lin Yi gave a slow, deliberate nod.
Yeah, I saw it all. That guy, his power lets him detach his mind from his physical shell. It's like he can project himself outward as pure intent. That's how he slipped into Uncle Anne. He just moved his consciousness right into the empty space.
He paused, organizing the fragmented memories of his out-of-body experience.
He must have sensed the danger the moment Flower released her scent. He knew he couldn't stay in his own body. He was too late to fully escape, so he ejected his mind to avoid being taken down with his physical form. We were just convenient targets. He saw Uncle Anne as a fresh vessel and took it. That's what started this whole mess.
So if we just kick his ghost out of Uncle Anne's head, the real one comes back? Is it that simple?
Lu Linhai looked from Lin Yi to the fighting figures with desperate hope.
In principle, that's the solution. However,
Zhang Cheng trailed off, his eyes darting toward the mantis wolf that loomed in the shadows.
But what? What's the problem?
Zhang Cheng dismissed the thought with a sharp movement of his head, turning his attention back to the task at hand.
never mind that now. Just focus. You have to get that parasite out of Uncle Anne. I'll handle the fallout. Just do your part.
Lin Yi surrendered to the darkness once more, his physical form collapsing like a marionette with its strings cut.
Is he? Did he go back in?
Lu Linhai stared at Lin Yi's limp body, his voice hushed.
Don't say it like that. It's bad luck.
Zhang Cheng rose to his feet, his posture tensing as he prepared for the next move. Stay with him. I need to see if that monster is willing to talk.
Wait, what?
Lu Linhai's jaw dropped. The idea of reasoning with a nightmare was beyond his comprehension. Across the clearing, the possessed butcher's eyes snapped open, wide with a sudden, sharp realization. A shadow of uncertainty flickered across his face. The stranger was losing his grip. The hum of power from the gauntlets died down, the crystals fading to a dull glow. The man's very aura began to shift and warp.
How? How did you manage to breach this vessel? This makes no sense. Why does your resonance match my own so perfectly?
He whipped around toward Lin Yi's prone form. In a sudden, violent motion, the butcher's blades erupted from his belt, zipping into the dense foliage like guided missiles. A sneer of pure contempt twisted the butcher's features. A chilling, mirthless laugh rang out.
If you want this body so badly, then I'll make sure you never leave it. You can rot in here with the rest of him.
Hidden by the trees, the knives curved through the air, plunging back toward the clearing from every angle. They were aimed straight for Lin Yi's defenseless heart. Lu Linhai scrambled to intervene, but the blades moved with a speed that mocked his human senses. He couldn't even see where they were coming from. Terror and resolve warred in Lu Linhai's eyes. Then, with a guttural growl, he made his choice.
Lin Yi, stop!
Zhang Cheng saw the look in his friend's eyes and felt a cold pit of dread open in his stomach.
Get out of the way!
Lu Linhai's voice was a roar as he cast aside his weapon.
I've got him! Don't let them hit him!
He lunged, shielding Lin Yi with his own frame. He braced himself for the impact, offering his back to the storm of steel. The knives struck home with a series of dull, heavy impacts. Fabric shredded, but instead of the spray of blood he expected, there was only the sound of metal hitting something incredibly hard. Zhang Cheng's heart stopped. Through the rents in the boy's shirt, a dark, gleaming surface was revealed, a sight he had seen too many times in his nightmares. It was the unmistakable obsidian armor of a mantis wolf. But as he looked closer, the structure wasn't a perfect match for the pure predators. A true monster's shell was a solid, uncompromising casing. It was built for war, not for flexibility. What Lu Linhai possessed was a more intricate, segmented armor rows of overlapping scales that moved with his breathing, fused directly into his spine.
Lin Yi, what have you become?
The strategist was finally at a loss for words, his mind reeling from the betrayal of biological reality. Every strange quirk, every moment of sudden secrecy, it all clicked into place. The reason for the boy's constant vigilance over his own skin was finally laid bare. The knives didn't stop. They veered off the armored back, sweeping low to the ground to strike at Lin Yi's exposed throat from the sides. Before they could find their mark, a blur of green lashed out. Flower's vines snapped shut around the blades, pinning them in place with impossible strength.
Wait, Lin Yi isn't the target.
Zhang Cheng's eyes widened as he looked back at the butcher. He screamed a warning to the girl. But it was too late. The stranger had already primed the gauntlets. Using Flower's moment of rescue as an opening, he unleashed a searing torrent of pure kinetic force. In a place far removed from the forest's carnage, Lin Yi's consciousness flickered back to life. The sight that greeted him was so mundane, so familiar, that it felt like a sharper blow than any physical strike. He found himself behind the counter of the butcher shop, surrounded by the iron scent of raw meat and the clinical white of the ceramic tiles.
Hey, boss, let me get 5 pounds of the pork shoulder, will ya?
A stranger's voice broke the silence. To his horror, Lin Yi felt his own limbs move without his consent, turning him to face the customer.
Coming right up. 5 pounds, fresh and ready.
The words that spilled from his lips weren't his own. The voice was deep, resonant, and unmistakably Enchengdao's. It was a voice filled with a light-hearted warmth that the grim butcher he knew had never possessed.
That's quite a lot for one meal. Planning a big family dinner?
The heavy cleaver felt like an extension of his own arm. As the steel caught the light, he saw a reflection that wasn't his own, the face of a younger, happier Enchengdao. The impossible thought seized him. Had he somehow usurped the butcher's very identity? Where was the dark forest? Where were the monsters? How had he been transported back to this ghost of a normal life? With a practiced motion, he brought the blade down, the steel biting cleanly through the meat and bone.
Is it really? I don't know. It feels like I'm barely getting enough.
The customer let out a short, jovial laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes.
I was actually worried it might be a bit on the light side. But then again, it's only a side dish. The main event is what really matters.
A side dish? You're kidding, right?
Lin Yi felt the butcher's vocal cords tighten with genuine perplexity.
Who on earth uses 5 pounds of prime pork as just a side? What kind of feast are you having?
He swung the slab onto the metal scale. The needle settled with professional precision. His hands moved with lightning speed, wrapping the meat in paper and sliding it across the counter.
There you go. Threw in a few extra ounces for good measure. Don't be a stranger now.
You just don't understand the hierarchy of flavor, boss. The main course has to be special. It has to be the most delectable thing in the world.
The man's throat bobbed as he looked at the package. He snatched it up with a hunger that seemed almost predatory.
Catch you later, boss. Enjoy the day.
Lin Yi's mind raced, trying to bridge the gap. He remembered the forest, the possession, the desperate plan, and then nothing. The transition had been instantaneous, a leap from a nightmare into a dream that felt far more dangerous.
Chengdao, are you still working so hard?
A soft, melodic voice drifted from the storefront, cutting through the hum of the refrigerators. Lin Yi looked up and saw a woman he had never met before approaching the counter with a gentle smile. She looked exhausted but radiant, her hands resting protectively on the large curve of her belly. She was heavily pregnant.
Honey, what are you doing out of the house in this heat?
And Chengdao's voice was thick with worry. Lin Yi felt his body drop the knife and rush around the counter to meet her.
Don't you dare take another step. Just stay there. I'll help you into a chair.
Oh, hush. I was just lonely at home. I missed seeing your face, so I thought I'd stop by and say hello.
The butcher let out a goofy, boyish chuckle that made Lin Yi's skin crawl with the sheer wrongness of it. This was a version of Chengdao that had been buried under years of blood and silence. The butcher had a wife, a life outside the slaughterhouse. There was a child, a family that he had never mentioned to anyone. The man who had become his mentor and protector was suddenly a complete stranger. The suspicion wouldn't leave him. Was this a human family or another layer of the grotesque deception? And what kind of creature was currently growing inside that woman's womb? The world dissolved into a smear of colors. When the haze cleared, the blood-stained meat shop was gone, replaced by the oppressive emerald shadows of a thick forest. The perspective hadn't shifted, though. Lin Yi was still anchored, a silent passenger behind the eyes of Chengdao. A sudden cold clarity washed over him. This wasn't a vision, it was a memory, a living echo of the butcher's hidden history. Through the butcher's eyes, Lin Yi watched the frantic chase. And Chengdao was deep in the brush, struggling to catch a group of runaway swine. The animals were impossibly nimble. Every time Chengdao lagged, they would pause, letting out sharp, high-pitched squeals that sounded disturbingly like laughter. Fury flared in the butcher's chest. He gripped his heavy cleaver tighter, his breath coming in ragged bursts as he pushed through the thorns, until the pigs abruptly stopped. But as he moved to strike, the pigs began to change. Their hides stretched tight, their bodies bloating with unnatural speed as if some invisible pump was forcing air into their veins. And Chengdao halted, his cleaver forgotten. He stared in paralyzed horror at the distended, quivering shapes that had once been livestock. Lin Yi felt a jolt of recognition. He knew that grotesque phenomenon. The animals had wandered too far, tripping the invisible trigger of the city's perimeter defenses. For a man who spent his days knee-deep in offal, the sight of the carnage didn't break him, but the unnatural manner of it left a cold knot in his gut. Wisdom won over curiosity, and Chengdao stepped back from the red mist, deciding that this was a matter for the authorities, not a simple butcher. He reached for his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen, only to find the signal bars dead. The forest had swallowed the network whole. Desperate for service, he began the descent, but as he skirted a rocky outcrop, his foot brushed against something white and porous, a sun-bleached human skeleton. The term freaks meant nothing to him then. He glanced at the shredded papers nearby, scanning the mentions of mantis wolves with a skeptic's eye. Strange names on paper were the least of his worries. The real question was how a human being had been left to rot in these woods without anyone noticing. The bars on his phone finally flickered to life, and the call went through. It wasn't long before the crunch of gravel announced the arrival of 2 uniformed officers. With the butcher leading the way, The officers surveyed the grim clearing, the scattered white bones, and the red ruin of the exploded swine. The officers didn't whisper. They spoke with a chilling openness, as if Chengdao was nothing more than a piece of furniture in the room.
So what's the verdict? Does this count as him seeing too much, or can we let it slide?
Oh, it counts. In fact, I'd call it a stroke of luck. A perfect opportunity. He's already seen the truth. If we let him walk away, he'll start squawking to anyone who'll listen. Which means we might as well just sit down and enjoy our meal right here, right now.
The word hung in the air, cold and nonsensical. Eat? And Chengdao's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Were they talking about the pigs? It was a butcher's logic. The meat was fresh, untainted by sickness. A quick cleanup, and it could still be salvaged, perhaps even sold to cover the loss. But the thought died the moment he looked up. The officers weren't looking at the pigs. Their eyes were locked onto him, unblinking and hungry. A cold sweat broke out across his neck. Their gaze wasn't human. It was the look of a starving beast that had finally found its prey. Pure, unfiltered gluttony.
He's right. Even if he talks, his fate is sealed. He's destined for the plate eventually. So why wait? We might as well enjoy the freshest cut ourselves while we have the chance.
As the officer stepped forward, his skin began to ripple. Something large and multi-jointed was thrashing beneath the surface of his face. His partner was no better. The man's jaw unhinged with a wet crack, the corners of his mouth tearing open to reveal something trying to claw its way out.
What? What the hell are you?
Terror, cold and sharp, pierced his heart, and Chengdao's hand flew to his cleaver, his knuckles widening as he prepared for the unthinkable. The uniforms shredded like paper as jagged, scythe-like blades erupted from their shoulders. 6 spindly chitinous legs burst from their torsos, followed by the obsidian gleam of a beetle's shell. The horrific transformation triggered a memory. Those sketches on the bloody scraps of paper, they weren't drawings, they were portraits. The nightmares had stepped out of the ink and into the world. They were real. They were the things the papers called freaks. The things that had been men were gone, replaced by a blur of chitin and claws. They lunged at Chengdao, their hunger of physical pressure in the air, desperate to tear him apart. Lin Yi's muscles coiled, his instinct screaming for him to intervene. But he was a ghost in this machine, a helpless observer trapped behind the butcher's eyes. The only solace was the certainty of the past, and Chengdao survived this day. Lin Yi clung to that fact, forced himself to breathe through the secondhand terror. But the man he watched wasn't the fragile youth Lin Yi had once been. This was a butcher, a man built of corded muscle and a heart hardened by years of slaughter. The heavy cleaver in his hand was an extension of his arm. He stared at the monstrosities with a grim, unwavering focus. The shock was there, but the fear found no purchase in him. Yet, courage wasn't knowledge. The butcher didn't yet understand the nightmare he was facing. He didn't know that these weren't just animals, they were the world's new masters. He lashed out, the cleaver whistling through the air to strike the obsidian shell. The impact sent a bone-jarring vibration up his arm, leaving his palm numb. But the creature didn't even flinch, only a shallow white mark marred its surface. They worked with a pack-like precision, flanking him from both sides, outnumbered and outmatched by their unnatural speed. The butcher was pinned against the unforgiving edge of the thicket. Survival overbore pride, and Chengdao ducked a whistling scythe and threw himself through a gap in the brush, sprinting down the steep mountain path with the monsters at his heels. Panic is a cruel master. A loose stone skittered beneath his boot, and the butcher was suddenly airborne before slamming into the damp earth. His cleaver was wrenched from his grip, spinning through the mud. Before he could even gasp, the lead monster was upon him, its scythe-like arm raised for the kill. Death was a fraction of a second away. But in that frozen moment, a bizarre electric hum vibrated through the air. Lin Yi felt it too, the awakening of a power that defied the laws of the world. The cleaver didn't lie in the mud. It twitched, then flew upward, snapping back into the butcher's palm as if pulled by an invisible tether. There was no time for wonder, and Chengdao threw himself into a frantic roll, the monster's blade buried in the soil where his head had been. In that desperate blur of motion, he saw it, the vulnerable, unarmored gaps in the creature's joints. The shell was impenetrable, but the joints were soft flesh. The realization was a spark, and the cleaver responded, vibrating with an eager, murderous energy. A surge of raw physical power flooded the butcher's veins. He released the hilt, and the cleaver became a projectile of pure malice, screaming through the air toward the creature's elbow. The monster's reflexes were too slow for the telekinetic strike. In a spray of dark ichor, the scythe-like limb was severed cleanly, falling to the forest floor like a piece of discarded machinery. The blade returned to its master's hand with a satisfying thud. The shock was gone now, replaced by a cold butcher's ruthlessness. He wasn't the prey anymore. Blood soaked his uniform, but the battle was won. Amidst the emerald silence of the forest, the butcher stood over the twitching remains of the two monsters he had systematically dismantled. The blood on the forest floor was a grim confirmation, and Chengdao scrambled back to the skeletal remains, scooping up every shred of paper before racing back toward the sanctuary of his home. The full scale of the nightmare remained hidden from him. He had no way of knowing how many of those things walked among them, or that a ring of lethal technology now cut off all escape from the city. The predators had worn the uniforms of protectors. If the officers didn't report in, the hive would notice, and then they would come for his family. A cold, frantic urgency seized him. There was no time for police reports or explanations. He had to gather his family and run, as far and as fast as possible. He shoved the bloody documents into a tattered bag, his own wounds forgotten in the rush. Every second wasted was a second the monsters used to close the net. He paused at the threshold, his gaze falling on the heavy butcher knife resting on the blood-stained chopping block. Remembering the jarring impact against the carapace, he grabbed it, sliding the cold steel into his bag. Lin Yi watched the butcher's frantic preparations with a heavy heart. He knew how these stories ended in this world. And Chengdao's love for his family was a lighthouse in the dark, and lighthouses always attracted the things from the deep. The world around him dissolved into a hazy blur once again. When the fog finally cleared, and Chengdao found himself standing in the familiar surroundings of his own living room.
Chang'er, you're home late. What kept you?
The sound of the front door had drawn his mother out from the kitchen, her face a mask of domestic concern.
Oh goodness, what on earth happened to you? You're covered in wounds.
She gasped, her eyes widening with a shock that felt almost too perfect, her gaze scanning the injuries marking his body.
Mom, where's Jia? I don't see her anywhere.
He scanned the room with desperate eyes. His father was there, seated stoically on the sofa, but the sight of his pregnant wife was missing from the scene.
She went out for a bit of fresh air, said she'd been cooped up all day and needed to walk around.
His mother offered the explanation with a calm, practiced ease.
She insisted on going by herself, just wandering around the complex to stretch her legs. I offered to accompany her, but she was quite adamant about going alone.
And Chengdao, look at yourself. What happened out there?
His father rose slowly from the worn fabric of the sofa, his presence heavy and demanding.
Where did those injuries come from? Explain yourself.
I'll explain that later. Pack your things first. I'm going to find Jia.
He let his belongings fall to the floor with a heavy thud, his movements frantic and fueled by a growing panic.
Something is terribly wrong here. We're in grave danger. We have to get out of this place right now.
Something is wrong? What could possibly be wrong, dear?
His mother tilted her head, her voice laced with a confusion that didn't quite reach her eyes.
Everything seems perfectly fine to me. You're just overwrought.
He spoke with a desperate, rapid-fire urgency, the words spilling out of him in a torrent of fear.
Dad, Mom, please, listen to me. This city is crawling with monsters, and they've already tracked me down. You have to trust me. We must leave this second, or those things will find their way to our doorstep.
Of course we believe you, dear.
Her immediate agreement caught Cheng Dao off guard, but the sudden shift in her tone sent a cold shiver down his spine.
It's just... there's something I find rather peculiar.
A sharp, jagged laugh erupted from her lips, followed instantly by his father, who joined in with a mirroring, hollow chuckle. Their faces twisted into grotesque, unnatural smiles, the maternal warmth in their eyes bleeding away into a raw, predatory hunger.
Tell me, Chang'e, how exactly did you find out?
Dad, Mom, what are you talking about? You're scaring me.
The horror was undeniable now. Their human skin began to split and fray, revealing the dark, sickening glint of a chitinous carapace emerging from the ruptures. He stood frozen, his mind screaming in denial even as the nightmare unfolded before his very eyes. Lin Yi could feel the violent tremors racking Cheng Dao's frame, a familiar sense of existential dread washing over him. To witness the people who raised you, who you loved and trusted, peel back their humanity to reveal the monsters beneath, it was a psychological blow that left him paralyzed.
Chang'e, we were never your parents. We are your masters.
Her voice had lost all pretense of domesticity, growing high and sharp with a terrifying excitement.
Think of it like raising livestock. Some prefer the tender meat of a suckling pig, while others like them fully grown.
His father stepped forward, his voice a deep, resonant growl as he took over the explanation.
As for us, we've always had a particular fondness for the flavor of mature meat.
Exactly. Just look at those muscles. I can almost taste how chewy they'll be.
She sighed, a wet, clicking sound that echoed in the small room.
It's such a pity, really. If only we'd let you grow for a few more years. A little more fat on those bones, and you would have been a truly exquisite feast.
When the livestock is ready, it's time for the slaughter.
He opened his mouth wide, thick strings of saliva dripping from the corners of his splitting, inhuman lips.
If humans weren't such precious cargo, I'd be indulging in this meat every single day.
Precious? Lin Yi focused on that single, revealing word uttered by the two creatures. It was a detail that didn't quite fit the established order of things. He knew there were massive, industrial-scale facilities dedicated solely to the cultivation of humans as livestock. So why would these two freaks consider them something so rare and valuable? The question hung in the air, a small but significant crack in the horrifying reality of the situation.
No, this can't be happening. It's a nightmare. It has to be a nightmare.
And Cheng Dao shook his head violently, his mind desperately clawing at any explanation that wasn't the visceral truth standing right in front of him. But no matter how much he tried to look away, the grotesque reality remained, cold and absolute. He wasn't ready to end here. He certainly wasn't going to let his life be snuffed out by these two abominations that wore the faces of his parents. The second the creatures lunged, and Cheng Dao threw himself into a desperate roll across the floor. Scrambling back to his feet, he instinctively reached out. As if answering his silent call, the heavy butcher's cleaver from his bag soared through the air and slammed into his palm. He white-knuckled the handle, his gaze momentarily falling on the empty husks of human skin that lay like gruesome confetti on the ground. A storm of conflicting emotions raged within him.
What in the world was that?
One of the abominations recoiled, its voice high and jagged with a sudden, sharp confusion.
How did that blade just move on its own? It flew right into his hand.
Do they really have no idea what a god chosen is? Lin Yi observed the creature's reaction with a growing curiosity. It was another anomaly in a night already overflowing with them.
It doesn't matter. I've waited far too long for a taste of fresh human meat to let a little trick like that stop me.
The other freak ignored the display of power, its hunger far outweighing its curiosity as it pressed the attack. Fleshy tentacles, coiling with reverse barbs, erupted from its midsection, whipping through the air in a desperate attempt to ensnare Chengdao. He stared back at the monsters, a single thought repeating in his mind like a mantra. They're not my parents. They're just things wearing their faces. He began to strike back, his movements fueled by a mix of survival instinct and raw desperation. Yet, compared to the lethal efficiency he had shown earlier, he was noticeably slower, his strikes lacking their usual precision. It was hard to tell if it was the physical toll of his mounting injuries or the psychological weight of the truth finally catching up to him. Just as Chengdao was driven back toward the apartment entrance, the sharp click of the door opening echoed from behind him. His wife, Jiajia, stood in the doorway, about to step into the carnage.
Jiajia, strike him now. He knows the truth. Kill him.
One of the monsters shrieked the command, its voice a jagged tear in the air. A cold wave of horror washed over Chengdao. Not her too. Please, not Jiajia. He spun around on instinct, his blade already whistling through the air, aimed squarely at the figure in the doorway. But just as the cold steel was about to taste flesh, he yanked the strike back, his arm trembling with a sudden, paralyzing hesitation. Standing before him was the woman he loved, her face a picture of familiar, domestic warmth that he couldn't bring himself to shatter. He stared at her, the butcher's cleaver frozen in midair, his heart refusing to accept the possibility that she was anything other than his wife. The world around him began to warp and blur. Lin Yi realized it wasn't a glitch in the memory. It was the salt and sting of tears welling in Chengdao's eyes.
Brother Chengdao?
A sharp, panicked scream pierced the air, ringing in his ears with a desperate intensity. In a sudden, desperate movement, Jiajia threw her arms around Chengdao, her strength surprising him as she spun him around and shoved him toward the open hallway. A heavy, wet thud echoed on the floor, followed by the sickening sound of liquid hitting the linoleum. Bright crimson blood began to pool on the ground, dripping slowly from a dark, jagged object. A freak's razor-sharp forearm had impaled Jiajia's body, the cold chitinous blade protruding from her chest. And Chengdao stood paralyzed, his mind unable to process the sight. Is she one of them? Did they lie to me? The realization hit him like a physical blow. The creatures had orchestrated the entire thing, using his love for his wife against him.
What a tragic waste.
The monster hissed with a cruel, mocking laugh, its mandibles clicking in amusement.
A fresh little piece of livestock was almost ready for the world. Once it arrived, we could have simply swapped our skins and continued the charade as its loving parents. If you hadn't been so nosy, you might have even held your child before your own slaughter.
But it's not too late for a little demonstration. Come here. Before you die, let's take a closer look at this unborn little livestock.
The other freak stepped forward, its presence heavy and overwhelming. A thick, barbed tentacle erupted from its abdomen and plunged into Jiajia's belly with a sickening squelch. In one violent, heart-wrenching motion, a tiny, blood-drenched life was ripped away from her body. Beasts, you goddamn monsters! Lin Yi's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ground together. A primal urge to surge forward and rip those creatures limb from limb tore through him. But he was a prisoner of the memory, a silent witness to a tragedy that had already been written in blood. There was nothing he could do but watch through in Chengdao's tear-filled eyes as the nightmare reached its horrific conclusion.
Brother Chengdao.
Jiajia's lips moved with agonizing slowness, her voice a faint, dying whisper that barely carried the weight of her love. Her hands, slick with her own blood, trembled as she tried to reach out to find his touch one last time. She desperately wanted to hold him, to tell him one final thing, but the strength had already fled her body. Her hands fell limp against the cold linoleum, her life finally flickering out like a spent candle. In that instant, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated fury crashed over Lin Yi. It wasn't his own. It was the raw, bottomless hatred of Chengdao, a rage that threatened to consume everything in its path.
Org.
A thunderous, primal roar erupted from Chengdao's lungs, the sound vibrating through the narrow hallway. At the entrance, his discarded backpack began to thrash violently, as if something within was fighting to escape. A series of sharp, metallic clangs rang out, and the heavy fabric of the bag suddenly shredded apart from the inside. A dozen razor-sharp butcher's knives exploded into the air, hovering for a split second before screaming toward the monsters with lethal, telekinetic speed. The blades bit deep into the creature's joints, their movements perfectly synchronized with Chengdao's unbridled rage.
Beasts, you goddamn monsters. I'll kill you. I'll butcher every single one of you.
He white-knuckled his heavy cleaver and lunged forward, his movements a blur of pure, unadulterated hatred. The blade swung high and slammed down onto the freak's armored head with the force of a falling mountain. The dark carapace held firm, but he didn't falter. He struck again and again, twice, 3 times, 4 times, each blow more violent than the last. Even as the cold steel began to chip and crack against the monster's armor, his relentless assault never stopped for a single second. The sharp click of a nearby door opening cut through the sounds of the struggle. A neighbor, drawn by the commotion, stepped out into the hallway. Seeing the monsters on the ground, the newcomer didn't flinch. Instead, a slow, grotesque smile spread across their face.
Ah, so you finally found out, did you?
And Chengdao's head snapped around, his eyes burning with a dark, murderous intensity. The swarm of butcher's knives gathered around him like a whirlwind of death before screaming through the air toward the new intruder.